Hey, everybody. It is Eric J. Olson, and I have a great interview for you today. So this is part of the Journey to $100 Million podcast. If you're not familiar with it, you can go to journeyto100million.com. We have a daily podcast about how we are growing our digital marketing agency into a $100 million per year national powerhouse. And in the daily podcast, we talk about all the things that we're doing on a daily basis to try to achieve that goal. And a lot of the things that we talk about are tips and tricks that we're picking up along the way, and frankly, mistakes that we're making along the way and what we're learning from those mistakes. But look, I can only make so many mistakes myself. There are lots of other mistakes that we haven't even made yet. And so for that reason, we like to bring other entrepreneurs onto the show, interview them live on social media. And then what we'll do is we'll take a snippet from this, or maybe two snippets, and we'll turn it into one of the episodes that you hear on the podcasting platforms. So without further ado, let me bring today's guest on. We have Todd Palmer. Hey, Todd, how's it going?
Doing well, Eric. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Appreciate your time.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me on today. It's a great way for me to end my week.
Well, great. All right, everybody, let me introduce you to Todd. I'm going to read a little snippet here. So Todd is an executive coach, keynote speaker, renowned thought leader, author, which we'll talk about your book, and CEO who is committed to helping business owners tackle their obstacles and clear their path to success. As an entrepreneur and active CEO, Todd knows the struggles business owners face regarding people, cash, strategy, and execution. Those are familiar topics. We'll talk about that a little bit too. He took his company from being $600,000 in debt to making the Inc. 5,000. That is a huge swing. I definitely want to talk about that a little bit. As one of America's fastest growing companies, an astounding 6 times. That is very impressive, Todd.
Thank you.
That is quite the bio. And I didn't even read the whole thing. There's more, but yeah, let's hear kind of like in a nutshell, like your story. How did you start and where did you go?
Well, it's interesting how I started. I started because I was pretty much an awful employee, and the best way for me to make money was to go work for myself. I started back, I was 27 years old, and I had all these ideas that I think drove my bosses crazy about different ways we could run the business, things we could do to improve the customer experience, different ways we could approach the problem, and that wasn't being welcomed, crazy as that may sound. Yeah. So I did this crazy thing. I went to one of the 3 F's in life, friends, family, and fools. And I got one of them to loan me $15,000, and I started my recruiting business.
Which one was it?
It was a friend who became an investor, who became just more back to a friend, to now, just time has separated us over the course of time. Thank gosh I didn't go to family. Started the business day 72. We finally started turning a profit, which is rare, but I didn't know that. When I started the business in 1997, it was a great time to start a staffing business because there were more jobs than there were people. And going through that process, learned a lot. Fast forward 10 years later, we got about a $2 million run rate. I just I joined EO in 2003, so 3 years later in 2006. And I realized that I had this imposter syndrome. I feel like I have to be all things to all people about all issues all the time. And that was a very paralyzing experience for me. And that behavior pattern, combined with not wanting to have uncomfortable conversations with employees or customers, spiraled the business out of control. By September of 2006, on a $2 million run rate, I was $600,000 in debt. The bank saw the numbers. They made a phone call, said, "We're calling the line. You personally guaranteed this. You've pledged your home, and we're taking it all." So for the first time in my life, or one of the very few times by that point, I raised my hand and I got help, and I hired a coach. And he came in, we took a look at the business, took a look at me as the leader, and he goes, "This is potentially salvageable, but the only way to change your business, the only way to save your business is to change yourself and to change how you're leading this company, because you're leading it right off the edge of the cliff." And one of the first things you have to do is you have to go into your forum and tell them the truth, because I wasn't telling them the truth. Tell them how bad things were. Fast forward, changed the way I started hiring my internal people, came up with a process called hire for DNA, not for resume, because I was only hiring recruiting people and HR people and experienced people. Hired good people who bought into the system, bought into our core values, and turned that business around. By 2013, we had paid off every single penny of the debt, including getting a new line of credit from the bank as they subordinated that debt. And we hockey sticked the business to make the Inc. 5000 6 times, which is pretty cool. But the reality for me was I was still unsatisfied internally because I kept thinking external things were going to satisfy my internal demons, my internal challenges. Thought money and success and awards and all this kind of cool stuff was going to make me feel better. And it didn't. So then I hired a second coach. His name is Dr. Danny Friedland. He's out of San Diego, California. He's literally a neuroscientist. He's a medical doctor who knows how the brain works. Working with him, I basically changed my entire life. I've created a complete life by design model. I retired from my recruiting business a few years ago, and now I've been coaching leaders inside out leadership and seeing them grow and blossom into the entrepreneurs, the leaders and CEOs they want to be. One of my favorite clients, Tom, a year after working with me, his revenue was up 70%, but his profits were up almost 600%.
Wow.
So he goes, I'm working less and I'm making more because I'm watching my business through the proper lens. So that's the work I love doing. And then my book just came out, went #1. I mean, that's so cool. And
you have a copy there?
I did have a copy. Yes, there it is. There we go. From Suck to Success. Yeah, it's an Amazon International bestseller. And it's the impact it's had on people. I've heard from people around the globe. A guy out of Louisiana wrote me the other day. He's like, "Hey, I read your book twice. Can we get on a call?" Because I offered to do a free call with anybody who wants to chat about what they're struggling with. Because an entrepreneur alone is an entrepreneur at risk. That's why we join groups like EO and YPO and Vistage, because there's an isolation we go through. Back in '97, nobody ever told me that. So I love to get the message out. That's why I'm so appreciative to be on your show today, to let leaders know that fear and self-doubt is normal. Imposter syndrome happens to most of us, and there's ways to get out of it, to get unstuck, to grow your business, to grow yourself.
That's a crazy story. So $600,000, that was a line of credit that you had taken out and basically borrowed up to $600,000, and then the banks didn't like what they saw, huh? That must have been extremely frightful.
Paralyzing. I couldn't get out of it. Literally, in all transparency, Eric, there were days I could not get out of bed. So I couldn't go in and address the problem because in myself, I knew I'd created the problem. I kept employees around too long who were underperforming. Mm-hmm. I had clients who'd taken advantage of me. I'd given them extended payment terms. 2 of our clients went bankrupt to the tune of almost $250,000. So I paid out the money, paid out the taxes, paid all the insurances, and got $0 for that. I was the bank for my clients. And I didn't know what I didn't know. And I thought, because I felt the obligation, the pressure to know all these things. And what I found was my management style didn't create psychological safety in my community, whether with my vendors like my CPA or my lawyer, or with my employees at the time, to come to me and say, the way you're running the business is detrimental for the long-term health of the business. I had no idea. Once my coach came in and he ran a $600 million company, he was like, yeah, your behavior is a little out of control. and you got to go in, you got to deal with these things and lean into those uncomfortable conversations, or you're going to go under. And it was powerful for me because what I loved about it, the way he worked with me, and this is how I work with my clients now, is he walked every step of my journey with me. He just didn't do a quarterly session and then go back to, he's out of California. You go back to California. Like, we talked every single week, sometimes multiple times per week, as I was getting unstuck, as I was discovering new things, both opportunities and tragedies within the business. And that support was just crucial to growing the business.
Wow. That's a hell of a story, man. When it comes to coaches, are there different kinds of business coaches, like for different kinds of scenarios, or is it kind of one size fits all?
I wish more people would ask me that question. So coaches are kind of like falling in love, in my experience, because there's a multiple different ways to coach somebody. The way I coach, I use Greg and I use Danny as kind of my model. And I coach people where they are in the moment with what they need to create a life by design. Their business is part of that. Some people really need that. Some people realize that the only way to grow their business is to first grow themselves. Other people hire someone to coach them on a process. There's EOS, there's scaling up. Those are great processes. I use those with my clients when they're ready. What often people think, though, it's kind of like going to the doctor. I'm going to deal with the symptom, not the root cause. So if you hire someone to teach you a process, that's great. Are you really going to follow the process? A lot of the people who teach processes, the coaches who do those processes, bring me in after they've given the process. The people have paid all this money and they're not following the process. Well, what's the bottleneck? Well, the bottleneck is the leader. Why is the leader not doing the process? He doesn't know. Let's unearth that. Let's unspool that knot a little bit, get them unstuck around their feelings around fear, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, what their internal itty bitty shitty committee is telling them, and get them on the right path, because they often don't realize what they don't know, because in our society, it's so comfortable to deal with the symptoms and not the root cause. I'm a root cause coach. My philosophy is I believe every problem in business comes from one thing. It's always a people problem. Whether it's the people leading the company, the people working in the company, the people, it's always a people problem. So you can throw the greatest processes at something, but if the people aren't bought in, convinced, leading with authenticity, transparency, and vulnerability, and driving that organization forward, including saying, "Hey, I don't know something. That's what I struggled with," then you're not going to get unstuck to use the processes you just bought.
Interesting. Let's maybe like rewind just a little bit to when you were having issues. I'm curious, for you and in your situation, some of the symptoms, were they, you mentioned like maybe not addressing some people or situations quick enough or directly enough. What was it more kind of avoidance for you, or was it even destructive things, or a little of both?
Great question. It's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
So I call it the avoid dance. I just would see you coming down the hall. I know I got to address you, and I would just like find a way around you, or not come into your office, or stay home, or be on appointments that really weren't happening, because I didn't want to deal with you, until it got to such a high crescendo that I had no choice but to deal with you as an internal employee. Because the reality was, at least the size of my business was, I had 24 people working for me at one point. Who picked all those people? I did. Who led them? I did. Who had the KPIs for them? I did. If they weren't succeeding, it's because I brought them into my world.
Yeah.
And so what the story I told myself was, I'm a failure as leader because I've picked poor people. Well, the reality was I probably did pick some poor people. The other part of it was I didn't give them the proper metrics, the proper KPIs, and the proper roadmap to be successful. That's on me as the leader. So part of it was to avoid that. And I always would tell myself that, nice people don't fire people. Nice people don't have uncomfortable conversations. Nice people don't upset people. It goes back to childhood. Go along to get along. Children are to be seen and not heard. Well, the reality was I wasn't doing my job as a leader. My job as a leader is to lean into those uncomfortable conversations with massive curiosity. So it would look something like this. Eric, you've been a great performer for the organization for the 2 of the last 3 years. Last 6 months has really been tough. Tell me what's going on for you, versus, you're underperforming. You got 30 days to turn this around. You're on the chopping block. Well, the first thing you're going to go to is fight or flight. You're going to want to get out of there. You're like, I'm going on Indeed and ZipRecruiter. I'm going to put my resume out. Yep. You're not going to fire me. I'm going to quit first.
That's right.
I had to learn how to lead. That's what the coach taught me. As entrepreneurs, a lot of us get into being an entrepreneur because we don't want a boss. Sometimes what we need is someone to lead us, mentor us, and guide us. That's where the coach or the other people in our community come in. I needed to learn those things.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's interesting being, the owner of a business, the CEO, because you don't get performance reviews anymore. The only real performance reviews that you get are kind of indirect when you lose a client, or you lose a good employee, or even a bad employee, right? But when something bad happens and you have to figure out what problem was there and whether you contributed, and almost always you contributed to that problem.
I just talked to a client of mine today, working with a CFO of a company. He just put his resignation in about 20 minutes ago. About an hour and 20 minutes ago. I talked to him about an hour ago. And he's leaving the organization because of the CEO. And the CEO's head is in the sand, like mine used to be, avoiding the tough issues. And the CFO sees that the business, if it was a boat, the boat's the Titanic, because the CEO is guiding it towards the iceberg, because they just don't want to look to the right where the iceberg is. They just keep looking to the left. Our employees often know more about our businesses than we do, because they're the front lines. They're the ones interacting with the clients. They're the ones interacting with other people in the organization. Sometimes we're arm's length for whatever reason, or now because of the Zoom world post or pre and post COVID, we're distance. And the CFO is saying, the CEO is frustrated that I resign, and she's unwilling and unable to hear the reasons, because she is the reason. She is the leader. She is the person not taking the steps necessary to turn this ship around. And he goes, and I'm not going down with the ship. So those are tough conversations that we as leaders, if we're doing a good job, we're welcoming those conversations. We're having people, the Johari window exercise, that they're shining the light into our blind spots so that we can get better at our jobs.
Yeah. So as a leader, if you receive that kind of feedback, and it's certainly very negative, I would imagine for most people, if not all people, there's an immediate defense mechanism that goes up, right?
For sure.
How as someone that could receive that feedback, how can you kind of like evaluate that and gauge whether that's valid feedback or it's just someone who's frankly just bitching?
Yeah, for sure. So the model is really simple. It's called the active learning cycle. And we put all these issues that come to us in that active learning cycle because we want to learn through them. So if someone was listening or watching to us today and someone came to you and said, I'm leaving the company because of you. Yes, it's very normal to get defensive and immediately hijacked and triggered. We get immediately into fight or flight. The model becomes, how do I create a space so I can learn? Say this employee is going to leave. Well, what can I learn from them in this process? And it's the simplest of questions, and it's the hardest to ask. I want to validate that I've heard you. I understand you're leaving because of me. Tell me more. Tell me why you're leaving because of me. That's so hard because then we have to stand there, steal up, and get that feedback. And that feedback typically is going to be really hard. And in that feedback, there may be attacks. We get attacks. Tell me more. Tell me more, because we want to get to the root cause. Because if we have a blind spot as a leader and someone's going to give us that generous gift of telling us, that we have broccoli in our teeth, so to speak, we want to know that, because if, like in this company, I know that the way the CFO was telling me, he's the 5th or 6th key management leader to leave within the last year. So if people are leaving you, there's a problem. And it's probably the person looking at you in the mirror as you brush your teeth every morning.
Yeah. Now, but I guess, sometimes as a leader of a company, you have a vision, right? And you're going full steam ahead. So example, I want to reach $100 million by 2030. And we're pushing towards growth, and we're pushing towards hiring, we're pushing towards taking on more and more and more. Sometimes that's not what other people want in the company, right? They kind of want a lifestyle business.
Sure.
So if I were to receive feedback as an example from someone saying, hey, I don't know if we should be growing, but that's my vision, right? What can I do really to kind of either accept their vision of the future or reconcile with mine, or just say, well, we're not doing your vision, we're going with mine.
Sure. So part of the visioning exercise is to explain what the $100 million represents, not only to you, but to the organization. Why is that goal so important to you? A lot of leaders I work with in the beginning, we have a revenue goal as well. And the first thing we do is we unspool why that revenue goal means so much to you. Because it could be a great goal. It could mean a lot. I have one leader who's got a very high revenue goal, and he forgot to put in the margin goal. And so I said, so I'm asking him, we'll use yours. It's $100 million. What is your margin going to be on that? If your margin is only going to be 10%, so you can make $10 million, maybe there's another way to look at your goal, maybe adjust that goal. For example, like we did in his case, he's like, well, I want to be a $20 million company, but his margins are razor thin because he's going after the whales. He's hunting for the big buyers who want big buyer rates. I said, have you considered that you could be, what is the 20 million going to get you? And he goes, it'll give me 5 million net. What if you were a $12 million company with an $8 million net? He's like, tell me more. Because he only saw one formula. We changed the formula up. The model became going after small boutique offerings versus big whales. That's what we did with our business. We pivoted our model. We went after very specific niche people where we were the premium provider, because you can be, this from a marketing perspective. There's different ways to be a provider. But ultimately, it comes back to, what is your vision as a leader? Why this number is important to you? How do you cascade that message throughout the organization? And the reality is, you got to say things 7 to 12 times before people even hear them. And so as you repeat, reinforce, then you want to get that tribe behind you to drive that number, because $100 million is a wonderful goal. You might be a Superman, and you may never sleep, and you may never have any family or friends, but to do it by yourself would be so hard. You've got to get people to follow you. And so people are going to challenge it. Once you get them to understand what it represents, what their part in that is, how they contribute to that, especially millennials. Millennials are all part of teams. They want to be part of a team. They want to contribute to a team. They want to drive that team goal forward if they understand the purpose and the passion behind it.
Yeah, I kind of went through that exercise maybe about a year ago with my business partner, Kevin Daisy. And we realized that, $100 million, it's a big number. It's a lofty goal. But as say a rank and file employee, so what? It's not going to affect them. They're not going to get, 20% of that or whatever. So it probably doesn't resonate very well with them. So we had to really kind of think, well, what are we trying to get actually out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, one of the things that we realized is, well, in order to build $100 million company, we're going to have a huge organization with probably lots of different offices, different branches, different specializations, different companies potentially inside of one company, endless opportunity. And so that's the reality, is we're trying to create endless opportunity here versus just $100 million company. Now I'll take either one of those, but yeah, we certainly realized that just the monetary goal it wasn't even enough to motivate us. You know, it's nice to say it, but there needs to be more in it for more people than just us.
Well, I love what you're sharing. I think this is an important message for your audience, because the monetary goal is fun to a certain point, but I love what you said. It didn't motivate you. Yeah. There's going to be things beneath that, whether it's you're going to get, I'm making a story up for you, but you may get an intern one day who turns in 20 years later, he or she is the CEO or vice president of the organization because they've grown and you've been part of their maturation as a leader. There's joy in that. It's like raising kids. The lives we can impact, the families we can help, the parts of our community we can influence. You know, money at the end of the day, I find for most people, some people treat it as a scorecard, and that's fine. But a lot of people realize that money is nothing more than a vehicle, a tool for freedom and flexibility and impact in the world. So once you figure those pieces out, where can you make your impact? I've got a foreign mate of mine. He's got a big charity. He's got a great company, but when you get him fired up and talking about what he's most proud of, it's this charity he runs. And it's growing, and he's got all of his employees folded into that charity for activities and community. He brings the kids in, and the pictures and the tear. That's legacy. That's the stuff that people will remember at your retirement party. That's the stuff people will speak well of you once you're gone. Versus, yeah, Eric's awesome. He paid me 6 figures a year, but I really didn't know why I was there, and I just did a pretty good job. But versus, man, Eric, he was awesome. He helped me do this. He helped me take care of this. He helped me solve this problem. He created an environment where I felt seen, I felt heard, I felt known, and I felt accepted. That's what you can do.
Love it. Well, Todd, hey, I appreciate it. I got a bunch of notes here. I mean, this could turn into 2 or 3 or 4 episodes. So what I'll do is after this, I'm going to chop this up and take these little time stamps that I wrote down here, and we'll turn these into individual episodes of the Journey to $100 Million podcast. So, hey, thanks so much. If someone wants to reach out and connect with you, what is the best way to do that?
So, well, thank you so much for that opportunity. It's been an absolute great way for me to end my week talking to you. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, I think there's 2 ways to do it. Certainly go to my website for my book, FromSuckToSuccess.com. Go there, get a free chapter of the book. It's my gift to the world. I want people to be impacted, whether they can afford to buy the book or not, get the first chapter, see if it's for you, share it with everybody. Abundance, abundance, abundance. Anybody who wants to talk to me, go to extraordinaryadvisors.com, send me an email. I don't have an assistant. I don't have a Calendly. I answer everything. I guess I probably have a rotary phone around my office here somewhere. I'm kind of old school that way. And I'll get back to you and we can schedule a call, and I'm happy to help you get unstuck, whatever's holding you back.
Very cool. All right. Thanks so much. Hold on a second. All right. Appreciate it.